Welcome to Intro Psych Sessions, the second season, where I will rethink my entire Intro Psych course from beginning to end, asking friends and experts to help me figure out how to put it together in a way that implements recommendations and integrates the skills and knowledge that I want to give to my students. And who better to join me on this adventure, co-hosting the series with me, than Dr. Regan A.R. Gurung. This is Intro Psych Sessions Season 2, and I hope that these conversations will help you as you think about your students and your own intro course. Let's get to it. And now, a word from our sponsor.
Endless distractions, overbooked schedules, information overload. Students face so many barriers to being fully engaged with their schoolwork. That's why Macmillan Learning's Achieve for Psychology gives you the tools you need to keep them focused on your course, before, during, and after class. Whether it's the exclusive author-created content, captivating footage in our Introductory Psychology video collection, or the self-evaluation of our goal-setting and reflection surveys, Achieve helps students stay focused on the course and makes it easy for them to tell you when they need extra help. See for yourself. Go to macmillanlearning.com/psych sessions 2023 special for an introductory tour today. Macmillan's Achieve for Psychology, engaging every student, supporting every instructor, setting the new standard for teaching and learning.
Well, it is such a pleasure to be here with my co-host, Regan Gurung, and one of the greats of teaching of psychology. Dr. David Myers from Hope College is sitting across from us virtually. Dave, welcome to this series.
I'm delighted to be here without having any idea where we're going with this.
Well, and that's what's going to make it fun, Dave. You know, it's okay. It's almost like PowerPoint karaoke, which I just recently learned about. So,
is that right? Okay. Regan, say something about that. What was that?
So apparently PowerPoint karaoke is you stand up, you're given 6 slides, and you have to present it, you know, without having seen what it is before. So...
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I like that. Great.
What did you actually do?
Dave, get ready, Dave. Get ready for, we're going to pitch you some fun ones.
Regan, did you actually do it or just watch it?
No, I did not. I did not do it, but I know Lindsay Maslin and some folks used it at the pod conference that was in Seattle recently.
So
I heard about it, and it seemed like a great challenge for those of us who believe we can think on our feet. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity. But yeah.
All right. Well, Dave, I'm going to give you the rundown of what's going on here. Okay. So I'm now, I can't even believe this. I'm coming up to like close to 20 years of teaching introductory psychology. And, the first 10 years, I think I just didn't know what I was doing at all. And then in the last 10 years, kind of moved into more conversations and thinking about intro psych. And I always think about Frankensteining my course together. So I would see a little thing over here, a piece of research, and then add it to my course or whatever. But now I'm on my first sabbatical, and I have the time to overhaul my course completely, to really think through every aspect of it with, in my particular context, with community college students, many underprepared students for my course and for college in general. And I am investigating every part of my course as I rebuild it. And so this is very self-serving. Regan's here to keep us on track and to listen and give feedback about what he's hearing as well. But very self-serving. As I go through my course, I really am asking folks like you, all these people I really respect. They all have, a finger in the pot of introductory psychology. And we're going to focus on just maybe 1 or 2 issues in this 20-minute conversation related to the course. Now, we can do this one of 2 ways. Either I can present something to you and we can chat about it, or I could pose this question to you, which is, in intro psych right now, what do you think are the greatest kind of barriers that we can address or opportunities that we have in the course? Is there 1 or 2 things that stick out to you or I can give you some softballs.
Well, no, I'd love to hear your softballs, but in answer to that question, I think we live in an age of abundant misinformation, and there is so much that people believe that simply is not true, that the need for critical thinking has never been greater. And so I think that is one of the great challenges of education in general, and of psychological science in particular, is helping people think smarter and to be prepared to be wise citizens of a civil democracy in an era when people are believing things that are demonstrably untrue. And so we want people to have heart, to value their intuition at appropriate times, but also to be open to evidence and to factual reality. And so that to me is one of the big kind of overarching agenda items in today's culture.
Regan,
but go ahead and pitch your softballs.
No. Hold on. Let me pitch to you, Regan. Regan, I just heard wisdom. That's what I heard. Like this is a piece of the intro psych course. That is what we're talking about. It is the big thing. This is, where does the future of our society go from here? It seems to me to be a pretty dark time. And if people aren't getting these skills from this course, that's a problem. So Regan, sorry, I cut in on you, but I just did want to say that there's a level of kind of what this course can do. This course can actually give, provide students a way to navigate very, very difficult realities out in the world. Anyway, Regan, what do you think?
Well, I think, Dave, the neat thing about that really important point is when I look at the new APA student learning outcomes, and even the learning outcomes that we've used for the most part, that emphasis is on those skills. The emphasis is on, our perceptual biases. And of course, what I love about, trying to tackle misinformation in my own class is those first few weeks of the course, spending time on different types of research to show why experimental methods are different from correlational methods, which goes a long way towards saying, hey, the next time you get some social media on research shows, here are some things to think about. So I think that gives us a great, foot in the door there. I think, what your comment made me think about, Dave, too, is that's a really key critical thinking skill that spans across content. And no matter whether it's chapter 1 or 4 or 5 or 16, you should still be thinking about that content critically. And I guess what that gets me thinking about, and I'd love to get your take on this, Dave, and I'll set it up for you, is, Garth replanning and some could say tearing down his course and rebuilding his course. And when we put on our instructor hats and think about course design, we can really think about what's each class session going to be? What are students going to be doing? What are the discussions going to be? Now, you have another hat, a textbook author who's reading all this content, and you're reading all this excellent content. When you think about what you're going to put into the course, that you're actually working with students, what do you use to make that big decision about what content to include and what to not? I mean, I would think it'd be even tougher for you who has in your head all this content. Give us some help in guiding content selection. And Garth, that me, because Garth has this great template of the content he's selecting. Dave, I was wondering what you do.
That's a great question, Regan, because the question that textbook authors face is the same that authors face. What do you include? What do you decide what to teach? And so it's common to all of us. And I would say I have 3 answers in my mind. First, I'm always asking, what educated people need to know? Is this important for the discipline? Is this important for human understanding, for people who are going to go out from this course and hopefully live flourishing, intelligent lives? What do educated people need to know? And some things are important for the discipline, but people can live without knowing this. Other things I think, oh man, people need to know this. This is so important. Then the second thing is, it has to be something that we are capable of teaching, and students would be capable, realistically, of remembering if we taught it.
Yeah.
And so that's the second thing. It has to be teachable. It has to be memorable. And then the third thing is, for me at least, I have to have a place within my structure to hang it. I can't just teach some isolated thing, but it's got to connect to some larger narrative or framework. And so sometimes we build a whole branch. Like I didn't used to cover IO psychology, and then that got to be enough there that we added a whole section of material on IO psychology. Or likewise, what we were talking about earlier, the whole kind of science of how people come to believe what is not true seems to me is a big enough question that it deserves some focused attention.
Yeah.
And by the way, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, one potent example of something that people believe that is not true is every year Gallup finds that 70%, or this year, even more than 70% of Americans think there's more crime this year than there was last year. And last year, they thought there was more crime then than the year before, and so forth. And so we have political elections where we're scaring people about the crime wave. We just had one of our senators talk about the massive crime wave in the United States. But if you look at violent crime statistics, property crime statistics, as aggregated by the FBI, or if you look at Department of Justice crime victimization surveys, there's no crime wave out there. The crime rate is a fraction of what it was back in the early 1990s. And so, what's true is what Steve Pinker has said, the greatest lesson that students need to learn in studying psychology is to think in terms of evidence rather than anecdotes and personal experience.
Yeah.
Bad events drive news. Thanks to the availability heuristic, they influence our judgment of what's true. And so part of the challenge of teaching psychology is giving students the conceptual handles that help them think smarter. And then also, there's just abundant examples of how these conceptual tools can be applied, and we can become more evidence-based rather than anecdotal-based in our thinking.
Dave, did you, in your book, it's been a minute since I've read the first chapter of your intro book, but do you, is your book Ways of Knowing, as far as where you go through the different ways that we know things? Is that, I'm not sure if that is, but whether it is or isn't, I really like what you said a while ago, which is there is some room for intuition. There is ways of knowing based on anecdotal experience, but science is another way of knowing. I think that's really a valuable gift that we can give to our students.
Absolutely. And science isn't applicable to all questions.
That's right.
But it's applicable to some, and where it's useful, we should use it. And so I think in teaching psychological science, you're going to want to introduce kind of the analytical methods of psychological science that Regan has always been so great in teaching and experienced in teaching, and then apply those throughout the course. That's something that should weave through the course.
Okay, so I have a question about misinformation. Okay, so obviously this is a huge skill, this critical thinking skill that we want to give to students. It's one of the central skills. It's a major outcome for the APA IPI recommendations, and we want to kind of weave that through the course. But you can only weave so many of these really important ones. You only have room to teach them well. You can pick a handful, maybe. Somebody could do a whole course where the theme is misinformation, a whole intro psych course, and they could just hit it over and over and over again.
Oh, and there are such courses.
Right. And students would get it. Right. But for me, I'm sprinkling it in, and I have a concern that my students may not get it if I don't continue to hit it again and again and again. Right. But then, as we talked with Sue, you start taking time to do that, you have to leave something else out.
Oh, right. And psychological science is also a set of big, well-validated ideas that are powerful ideas that are worth knowing. So the power of positive reinforcement and how it's applied, that's something educated people need to know. Today, there was the announcement that Dunning and Kruger won the Grawemeyer $100,000 award for the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is a concept that educated people need to know. It's a useful, big, powerful idea, well established in psychological science. And there's lots of other big, powerful ideas. Certainly, that's part of what we teach too. But as we teach it, we also teach how we learn those things.
So Dave, let me pick up on that topic, and especially since this podcast is all about helping Garth. Garth, I'm gonna pick up on something that you and I chatted about earlier, right? And that directly relates here, which is how do we make the decision, right? Yes, we've talked about the decision of what to cover. What do we think they need to know? But here's the tricky question, Dave. There are two schools of thought. Students need to know whatever we cover in the classroom, period, or students need to know what we cover in the classroom and are responsible for everything in the book. And Garth and I have gone back and forth in conversations with folks about exactly this point. Where do you stand on that? What do you think?
Yeah. So I guess when teaching the class, I would say both. I mean, I hold my students responsible for reading the book and trust them to do so. But I'm not going to cover everything in the book. I'm going to cover some things I'm excited to teach and some things that I think they may need some help in learning. Just two thoughts about books in general. And here I'm not talking about mine, but all textbooks on behalf of all textbook authors. One, textbooks are admittedly conservative in that there's certain expectations that are formed over time because it's how it's always been done. And thus, instructors come to expect that, and publishers give it to them, and we kind of get locked into the past sometime. And so that's one thing to acknowledge. And so, Garth, you have the chance to break out from that, the cycle of the past that's reflected in the present textbooks, and do something creative. That's point number one. Point number two is, in doing that, I would advise to anybody creating their own course and their own teaching materials to have a certain amount of intellectual humility about their ability to homebrew something that is distinctly better than anybody else has ever created, or than is represented by the collective wisdom of the whole field, and all of us together, like the APA initiative, and defining, and the collective wisdom that's represented there. So think creative, but be constrained by intellectual humility, and have a certain amount of respect for the collective wisdom of your peers in your field.
I know you talk about kind of politics from a psychological science perspective quite a lot, Dave. And here's what I hear you saying right now. Take the best of both conservatism and being progressive, right?
Right. Sure.
Trust the long tradition in intro psych and the foundation of this course, and don't deviate completely, but stretch it and make it yours as well.
Sure. And you're going to be the best at teaching what you're really excited to teach.
That's right. Yeah. It's going to be the most engaging. Uh-huh.
And so much of that is having your passion come through, right? And Dave, I think one of your 3 points was things you are excited in teaching, right? And I don't think we can undervalue that. One of my but we've just got to watch it, right? We just got to watch how much of the course is just us. My favorite examples, going back 10 years when I started, looking at intro psych, was looking at some national surveys of what content areas were covered in books, and there were some courses where 70% of the course was psychodynamic and psychoanalytical. Right. And you can argue, well, those people were really enthusiastic about it, but then we're really not doing the course a favor.
Right. So their students are shortchanged.
Yeah.
Well, Dave, I have one other topic that I'd like to ask you about. First of all, is positive psychology, I can't recall right now, is positive psychology just an area that you got interested in kind of researching and learning about, or did you have formal training in positive psych? I can't remember, because I know you've written a lot about it. Okay.
The former. So sometimes when reading psychological science and reporting on it for college and university students, I come across material that strikes me as so interesting, so humanly significant that I think, whoa, more people should know about this. And that's what led me to write a book on the scientific pursuit of happiness. The title of the book was The Pursuit of Happiness. And then to kind of get into that. And then because of what I was doing there and some co-authoring I then did as a spinoff with Ed Diener, and being invited 25 years or so ago by Marty Seligman to gather with Barbara Fredrickson and John Haidt and a bunch of other luminaries of what became positive psychology at a retreat conference down in Alcomal, Mexico. That led me to just kind of be interested in everything that was under the umbrella of positive psych. But positive psych comes up in a lot of different areas. I mean, in teaching of emotion and personality and so forth. So,
well, let me share that I am, for the first time, I want to bring positive psych into my course explicitly for students. Now, do you have? I've heard the argument for positive psych that it is or isn't a new thing, right? It should be its own kind of topic in intro psych, or should it just be highlighted within other topics of intro psych? Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, the latter, I think. So that I wouldn't have a chapter on positive psychology, but rather there are a lot of positive psychology topics having to do with happiness and life satisfaction, with human virtues, creativity. I mean, there's so much that falls under positive psych. So if you go to the preface of my text, you'll see a guide that shows you where all the positive psych topics are found throughout the book.
Wow.
And so that would be one way to do it, to season the course with positive psychology content, but without having something explicitly. And you can teach about positive psych as a movement that encompasses all these things too. But it's not a positive psych course, it's an intro to psych course.
Right.
So Garth, let me ask you, right? Yeah. Because, just based on what this point about where I love the preface and where is it all through the book. I want to loop back to something you said a little bit before, where you sometimes feel like you hit a few topics and you wonder whether you should hit it more, right? Yeah. I mean, positive psych, or maybe even, going back to Dave's first comments, misinformation. As you think about it, are you thinking about picking some topics in this course and making sure it's in every chapter or every week? Is that?
Yeah. So I think that the misinformation piece, which I think is absolutely one of the most important gifts, the critical thinking gift that we can give to our students. I think that in the IPI outcomes, it in and of itself, scientific thinking is one of the three major outcomes, but then also in the themes, the theme E about our perceptions and biases filter our experiences of the world through an imperfect personal lens. I think those are, really nice work done by that group of folks who put those outcomes together, because those are the themes that I can hit again and again in the course, right? And I should. They're major outcomes for the course. But I do think that we have the opportunity to choose some other things, like how psychology can positively impact your life, which is actually another theme. But something like positive psych, which I'm just getting into, and I'm trying to wrap my mind around exactly what it is as a thing. So I've been reading Seligman this year. I've been just looking into it. And, I love two things. I love happiness. And Dave, I've heard your happiness talk before. Love it. I loved it way back then. I want my students to know about happiness and what leads and correlates to happiness and what does not. And I also want my students in a world where I think identity is very shaky for my 16 to 18-year-old students, and even more so, I think, than when I was their age. I want to teach them about strengths and the value of strengths as kind of an identity foundation. So I'm really looking at those two topics specifically. And I do think I'm going to actually put it right now in my course that I'm looking at. It's right after personality. I'm going to do a couple lessons on positive psych, specifically happiness and strengths. Yeah. So, Regan, did that answer the question, or what do you think, Dave?
No, absolutely. Yeah. Because I think as we move towards what's important, and more importantly, pay attention to what are our students learning and what are the best ways to help them learn. I think sometimes it's a question of repeating stuff over and over again with different variations on the theme, right? And I think the misinformation is a great example because, Dave, as you mentioned that, I'm thinking, wow, the next time I teach, I'm going to try and make sure that almost every week there's, we look at studies that have been misinterpreted for that particular area of psychology, and then talk about why and the design and practice that critical thinking, because I think that keeps it going. I mean, that constant is really helpful versus what I think many of us were trained or at least expected to do in the old days, which was let's march through the 16 chapters. That's boy, that was a different era when we thought about getting just content across and not so much about skills and actually learning and what's going on in the classroom.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Dave, you said something that I'll just address it real quickly. You were talking about the availability heuristic, and you were talking about how news media, all these sources, the 24-hour news cycle, this information that is just coming at us a lot of times with, kind of scary, fear seems to sell a little bit, but all this information, so much news, so many people trying to get allegiance through these headlines or by presenting their ideas in these certain, maybe misinformed or disinformed ways. And, I could see as an instructor that when I'm talking to my students about navigating this world of misinformation, that I'd have to get into, well, here's how this media thing is working. But I really like that and I think this is the gift we can give to students as a psychologist, you can look at that media cycle and the messages from a psychological perspective and kind of reveal what's going on and why it works and why it dupes us. I just a comment on that. Would you mind just commenting on how psychology allows us to do that?
Sure. Yeah. So, we know about the truth bias, which is our natural disposition to believe what others say. That's our default response. It worked for us in our ancestral history. Mm-hmm. We know about the power of repetition to kind of form memories, and we know about confirmation bias. We know about the availability heuristic. We know about group polarization, which is where I cut my eye at Keith in the discipline. In today's world, unlike the world of when I was doing group polarization research way back when, we no longer share common information sources. We can seek out media, groups online, cable channels, and so forth that are part of our tribal thinking with little exposure to others who think differently. And there's even new research that finds that it's once people believe something for reasons having to do with availability, repetition, confirmation bias, and so forth, it becomes very hard to unbelieve it. Even harder to unbelieve something than it is to believe it in the beginning. So we understand something of the psychological dynamics that are driving the misinformation effect. And that can lead people, for example, the more surveys find people who are fully vaccinated against COVID fear it more than people who are unvaccinated. And that older adults worldwide are no more afraid of COVID than are young adults, even though their young adults are at vastly less lethal risk to COVID. And so these are just a couple more examples of how people's beliefs are widely askew from reality.
I wish I could bottle you, David, and bring you into my to my first day of my intro psych course to talk about this. And actually, I know you have a lot going on, but as you're talking right now in this 30-minute conversation, I'm thinking, oh, it would be so great if Dave put out like a 25-minute video where he talks to students specifically about these things directly to students that we could show in our courses. I think that'd be kind of fun for, Anyway, no pressure.
Interesting you asked, but I actually gave a talk on this to the National Council of Social Studies teachers in Philadelphia a week ago. And now the response to that was encouraging enough that I've been asked to make that into a webinar that could be online someplace.
Oh, neat.
So,
neat.
I love it.
We'll see.
Well, and consider... I'm doing
this for the Psych 1 conference at Duke next June too.
I saw that.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. So, but create a version for students. I'll show it in my class every time.
Right. Hey, great to talk.
Yeah, great to talk to you.
Dave, I want to give you a 1-minute shout out. Love your new book. And the funniest thing happened, right?
Oh, thank you.
So the funniest thing happened. I'm reading your first chapter, all about the names that people, and the jobs and they live.
Right. It's just hilarious.
The very next day, I'm talking to a student in intro psych, asking her what she wants to do. She wants to go to the ministry. Her last name is Christian.
There you go.
Unbelievable.
The next day, I just thought it was the funniest thing. So I wanted to share that.
That's great. Thank you, Regan.
Yeah, folks, if you haven't picked it up yet, it's How Do We Know Ourselves? It's Dave's new book, and you can hear me interview Dave about that book on Psych Sessions. Just look a little bit back into the catalog. Dave, I appreciate that you always do this for us. And you bring so much wisdom, and I appreciate it.
That's great. Well, you two are two of my favorite people in teaching psychology. I've been blessed to get to know you both and respect you both so much. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay. Bye-bye.